Welcome to Africaness Podcast. Yes, a podcast dedicated to showcasing the richness and diversity of African culture. Join us as we explore the past, present, and future of the African continent and challenge common myths and stereotypes. Whether you're a non-African interested in learning more about the continent or an African seeking to connect with your roots, this podcast is for you. Yes, we aim to educate, entertain, and encourage through natural, authentic, and conversational dialogue. From solo commentaries to panel discussions, we'll share our experiences, stories, and expert views using metaphors, analogies, humor to help you discover the beauty and pride of Africa. Yes!
Welcome back, dear listeners, to another captivating episode of Myths, Racism, and African Realities. I'm Bumio Olabi, your guide on this enlightening journey. Today, we are diving head first deep into the world of myths and how they've shaped our perception of Africa, Africans, and African history. We will embark on a journey to uncover one of the most pervasive myths about Africa, the belief that it has no meaningful contributions to world history, and the belief that Africa has no ancient cultures, history, or civilization. Interesting, isn't it? For myths like this, it's very important that we don't just take it at face value. Reason being that they crumble under the weight of truth. And today, we're about to unearth that truth. So buckle up, ladies and gentlemen, because we're about to shatter the myth into 1,000 pieces. We're going to break it up into 1,000 pieces. Myths are like shadows that stretch across the pages of history. They come into existence and they follow a group of people about, wherever they go, whether they like it or not. They are born for various reasons and can linger like a stubborn fog. And in the case of Africa, myths have been woven into its narrative mostly by the Western world. And these myths often serve as dark mirrors reflecting the history of racism and oppression. My understanding is that racism has played a pivotal role in the creation and perpetuation of these myths. It's been used as a tool to undermine the worth of Black people and to claim that they have no significant history. The distortion of African history, fueled by racism, has had dire consequences. And I must say, that has had an impact both in the past and also having an impact in the present. And it has served as the cornerstone for social, political, and economical subordination of African people on both sides of the Atlantic. It is that deep, very, very deep. So the fact that there is a myth that Africa has no ancient cultures, histories, or civilization and has made no meaningful contributions to world history is mind-boggling. So let's begin by debunking the notion that Africa has been a passive observer in the theater of world history. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And in fact, it's quite the opposite because Africa's tapestry is woven with countless ancient cultures, kingdoms, and civilizations that have left an indelible mark on our global heritage. And to truly understand the depth of these myths, which suggests that Africa has no ancient cultures or histories or civilization and has made no meaningful contribution to the world history, we need to delve into the profound impact of slavery on the African people. This myth is so enduring because it's entangled with the historical stripping away of history, cultures, and the pride from African communities. The fact is that slavery was not merely an economic system. It was a systematic assault on the very identity and dignity of African people. When African slaves were forcefully taken from their homelands and transported across the Atlantic, they were also torn away from their histories, their cultures, and their heritage. They were often given new names, forced to adopt foreign customs, to adopt foreign cultures and tradition. And this deliberate act aimed to erase their individual and collective identities. And many Africans in the diaspora today struggle to trace their ancestral roots due to the forced severance from their heritage. This legacy extends to this present day, unfortunately. African communities around the world continue to grapple with the effects of slavery and the erasure of histories and cultures, and has left a void that many are actually working tirelessly to fill today. And the struggle for identity and pride is still ongoing. In our society today, there is so much ongoing by diversity and inclusion impacts change makers, trying to get the story back, the narratives back, and the facts back. So the struggle for identity and pride is still an ongoing effort, but it's also a story of resilience and reclamation. Imagine a vibrant tapestry of African cultures, each with its languages, its traditions, and customs. Through the brutality of slavery, this tapestry was worn apart. Families were separated, languages forgotten, forbidden, as it were, and traditions suppressed. And that was what was the impact of slavery in those days and even till now. There's an African proverb that says, a family tie is like a tree. It can bend, but it cannot break. This proverb nicely reflects the resilience of African communities, despite the attempts to sever their cultural ties during slavery. So today's discussion is actually not to dig deep into slavery, but to look at the impact of slavery on African people, its culture and tradition. So now let's return to the assertion that Africa has made no meaningful contributions to world history. In truth, Africa was not just a passive observer, it was a central player. Let's take a look at Egypt, for instance, one of Africa's most iconic civilizations, still standing strong as a beacon of human achievement, even till today. From its awe-inspiring pyramids to its advances in medicine, mathematics, and architecture, Egypt was and will always be a cradle of innovation. So to debunk this fallacy, we must travel back in time, back to the cradle of human civilization. Imagine yourself standing on the banks of the River Nile, where the great civilization of the ancient Egypt thrived. You see the towering pyramids and the magnificent temples. These are not just Egyptian treasures, they are the shared heritage of humanity. So here's where it gets really, really fascinating and interesting. Egypt's influence wasn't confined to its borders. The ancient Greeks, often celebrated as the founders of Western civilization, looked to Egypt as a source of wisdom. And that's actually the truth. They borrowed and learned from this African powerhouse, creating a rich tapestry of cross-cultural exchange that laid the foundations for what many Western ideas and innovations have even till today. In ancient Egypt, scholars and scribes recorded knowledge on papyrus scrolls covering mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and literature. We can give an example of the library at Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. That in itself is a beacon of knowledge. So let's get to some facts. In mathematics and geometry, the ancient Egyptians were well versed in geometry, which was crucial for land surveying, building pyramids, and those great, magnificent structures that we have in Egypt even till today. The Greeks, particularly mathematicians like Pythagoras, were greatly influenced by Egyptians' geometric concepts. The famous Pythagoras theorem, which relates to the size of a right triangle, has its roots in Egyptian mathematics. Let's take a deep dive into medicine, anatomy. Egyptian civilization had advanced knowledge. They had advanced knowledge of human anatomy, particularly due to their practices in mummification. Greek scholars like Herodotus and later Hippocrates learned from Egyptian practices. Herodotus, for instance, often considered the father of history, wrote extensively about Egypt's medical knowledge. Let's move over to architecture and column design, which obviously you would see clearly in most of the structures in Egypt. Greek architecture, renowned for its columns, was influenced by Egyptian architecture. You can ask me how. Because the Greeks adopted the use of columns, which were originally designed by the Egyptians in structures like the temples of Luxor and Karnak. The Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian columns in Greek architecture all have Egyptian precursors. So you see vividly that there is so much that Africa, specifically just narrowing down to just Egypt alone, has made significant contributions in the world history. Let's go into writing and literature. The Library of Alexandria in Egypt was one of the most famous libraries of the ancient world. It attracted scholars from various civilizations, including Greece. Greek thinkers like Eleusis and Archimedes found inspiration and access to text in this library, which contributed to the development of Greek knowledge, actually. And let's move over to astronomy. Some Egyptian constellations and star names influenced Greek astronomy. For instance, the constellation Orion has ties to Osiris, an Egyptian god. This example showcase how the Egyptians' knowledge in mathematics, medicine, astronomy, literature, and arts had a profound impact on the ancient Greeks. The interconnection of these two civilizations highlights the rich tapestry of knowledge exchange in the ancient world, emphasizing that African civilizations like Egypt were essential contributors to the foundation of Western civilization. So the question I ask myself is, where is this myth coming from? I could go on and on to other areas of Africa and their profound contribution to the world history. It's not merely a part of African history, it is one of the oldest and most influential civilizations in human history. But Egypt is just the tip of the iceberg. Because as we journey through Africa, we encounter the kingdom of Kush, a powerful empire that rivaled Egypt in what is now modern-day Sudan. The kingdom of Kush left us with a legacy of its pyramids and a script known as Meroitic, yet to be fully deciphered. So, the connection between Egypt and ancient Greece is a powerful illustration. The Egyptians, with their rich knowledge and influenced the Greeks. This cultural exchange laid the foundation for Western civilization. I'll say that again. This cultural exchange laid the foundation for Western civilization. Yet, this African connection has often been overlooked or downplayed in Western historical narratives. Let's take a moment to imagine the city of Great Zimbabwe. Its massive stone walls and structures built without mortar attest to the architectural prowess of its builders. Great Zimbabwe served as a center of trade and culture connecting Africa with the wider world. Africa's greatness is not just found in its monuments and innovations, but in the people who shaped its history. Consider Queen Zinga of Ndongo and Matamba, a fearless leader who resisted Portuguese colonialism in the 17th century. Her diplomatic prowess and military strategy are celebrated in African history even till today. There's so much to uncover, there's so much to say. But one thing I'm reminded of is this African proverb that says, however long the night is, the dawn will always break. This proverb reminds us that no matter how deeply a myth is entrenched, the truth will eventually come to light. Africa's ancient cultures, its pivotal role in the development of Western civilization, and its historical commitment to democratic principles are all testaments to the continent's profound contribution to world history. But myths about Africa don't solely originate from outside the continent. In an attempt to counter the denigration of African history, some have resorted to creating their own myths. And these myths, while well-intentioned, aren't always supported by evidence. They can perpetuate their own set of stereotypes, creating a different set of problems. You know, an African proverb that says, "A tree is known by its fruit." It has a significant meaning. Because just as we judge a tree by its fruit, we should always evaluate these myths by the consequences they yield. The question that naturally comes or that arises from, just thinking through this is, do these myths empower or do they diminish? Do they unite or do they divide? These questions cut to the heart of why we need to critically examine and challenge the narratives that diminish and divide, particularly in the context of racism. These are questions we must ask ourselves as we navigate this intricate web of narratives. Are we contributing in dividing a whole continent, a whole group of people, or diminishing them? Narratives that empowers or uplifts individuals or communities. They inspire self-confidence, resilience, and sense of possibility. Those are the kind of narratives that we should share. Empowering narratives acknowledge the achievements and contribution of African cultures and people throughout history. Those are the kind of narratives that we should share. They help build a positive self-image and collective sense of pride. Those narratives encourage empathy, solidarity, recognizing that we are all part of the human race, human family after all, with a rich tapestry of histories and cultures. And those are the kind of narratives that we should encourage and share. On the other hand, narratives that diminish Africa and its people erode self-esteem and perpetuate feelings of inferiority. They cast a shadow over the potential for growth and development, fostering a sense of hopelessness and disempowerment, dividing people, promoting stereotypes, prejudices, and discrimination. They create artificial boundaries between people, fostering mistrust and conflicts. They are very divisive, and they are used as tools to justify discrimination. The question I'm going to ask again, which I think it should be one that we all need to reflect on, is just as we judge a tree by its fruit, we should evaluate every myth by the consequences they yield. And the question is, do these myths that you hear of or you say, do they empower or do they diminish? Do they unite or do they divide? Racism, which is one of the most insidious weapons, has the ability to create negative images and stereotypes. And these images, deeply ingrained in popular culture, perpetuate harmful beliefs and biases. They shape our perceptions, often obscuring the vibrant, tapestry of African history and culture. So let's take note that every myth that paints African and Africans in a negative light are deeply intertwined with racism. These myths have been used historically to justify subjugation, exploitation, and dehumanization of African people. They reinforce racial hierarchies. That's it. Where one group is unfairly deemed superior to another. And that's the truth. So, dear listeners, to combat racism, we must challenge these negative narratives. By dismantling stereotypes and celebrating the achievements of African cultures and individuals, we work towards a more inclusive and equitable society. We recognize that every narrative that perpetuates division and diminishes potential contributes to the persistence of racial injustice. As we continue our exploration of myths, racism, and African realities, remember that the stories we tell ourselves matter. They shape our worldviews and in turn our actions. Let's strive to unearth the truth buried behind the layers of myths, to discover the rich and diverse history of Africa and its people. The myth that Africa has made no meaningful contributions to world history and has no culture is not just a historical falsehood, it's a powerful reminder of the enduring impact of slavery. It underscores the importance of recognizing and celebrating Africa's immense contribution to world history. So as we move forward, let's remember that acknowledging this rich history is not just only an act of justice, but it is also a step towards healing and understanding. To wrap up this journey through African history, we have charted the myths that Africa made no meaningful contributions to the world. The truth is, Africa's legacy is woven into the fabric of human civilization. Its wisdom, resilience, unity, and greatness have left an indelible mark on our shared history. So remember this: Africa's story is not a footnote. It's a chapter filled with triumphs, innovations, and enduring legacies. And in the next series of episodes that will be coming our way through Africaness podcast, we will delve deeper into the myths that have cast a shadow on Africa's diverse cultures. Thank you for joining me on this myth-busting adventure. In our next episode, we'll delve into more captivating stories that challenge misconceptions and reveal the rich tapestry of African realities. And until then, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep learning. Goodbye for now.
Thanks for tuning in to Africaness podcast, where we celebrate African culture and tell our stories. We hope you've learned something new and gained a deeper appreciation for the continent. Join us next time for more conversation, more stories, and more kindness. And remember, our past, present, and future are interconnected, and it's up to us to shape the narrative and create a better world for our children. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and stay proud of your roots. Africa, Emagba.